Hello, I'm Tone Lanzillo, and this is Climate-Duluth. Climate-Duluth is a series of conversations with people who live in Duluth who are concerned about and engaged in addressing various issues around the environment and climate change. And today I'm really happy to have with me Izzy Laderman, who's a junior at East High School. Welcome.
Hi.
Hi, great to have you here. Why don't we just start with, when did your interest in the environment and climate change begin?
Well, I've always been interested in it just because that's the way my family is. When I was younger, I'd be that one kid going out of her way to pick up trash, and everyone would be like, "Why are you doing that?" And it was just because that's the way I was raised. Okay. But it really, my big involvement in it started when I was in Amnesty International Club at my school. And people from Duluth for Clean Water came into the classroom and talked about speaking at the city council meeting about PolyMet. And so I went and spoke. And then they invited me to go down with them to speak with the Attorney General.
Oh, wow.
So it was a big jump there. But that next week I traveled down with them and we spoke to the Attorney General, Keith Ellison, about PolyMet and why it would be such a disaster, and I spoke on the point of view of the young generation and how it can really affect the future of everyone, but especially my generation. Mm-hmm. And from there it kind of just snowballed, and I would get more and more involved in different things, and I'd really discovered a lot of what I'm passionate about, which has my main focus really has been on the fossil fuel industry, and then also how the climate crisis affects people with disabilities.
And your interest in people with disabilities, where does that come from?
Well, I have a disability. I have a genetic condition called Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, and basically it just messes up my connective tissue, and it can cause a lot of problems. Okay. And I was researching, because, it would make sense that the climate crisis would affect disabled people or people with disabilities, but I didn't really heard anything about it. So I looked into it, and I saw, what I saw horrified me, in that, people have already died and continue to die every day because of the natural disasters, or not so natural disasters, but the disasters that occur, which are heightened and increased by the climate crisis. And governments and nobody really knows that, or they do know that this is happening, but people with disabilities have become expected casualties. And so no one is really fighting for us, for them. Mm-hmm. And so I wanted to make it a focus of mine, even though I do have privilege because I live in Duluth, Minnesota, so there's not going to be a lot of disasters happening here. But just because it's important that people know that that's an issue that's happening, and we don't see it enough or at all.
Right. Since you've begun this journey, who or what has inspired you or influenced you, do you think?
Well, definitely my family. I mean, we're very close, and my parents are awesome. And they do a lot of activism on their own. I attended my first protest when I was a baby, and in my baby book it has Izzy's first protest.
Really?
Yeah.
What was it a protest about?
Honestly, I think I have no idea. I can see the picture in my head. I have a pin on my hat that says something. I forget what it was for. Right. But they have been a huge influence and a huge support when it comes to helping me do that. Okay. And I just definitely think that all the other youth out there that are doing the amazing things that they have been a huge inspiration, especially when they're talking about climate justice and an intersectional climate solution. And that's why I've been inspired to try and make sure that people with disabilities are a part of that, because too often they haven't been.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. Over the past year, what are some of the things you've been involved in or working on this past year?
Well, so I have been part of the PolyMet issue, and I love helping out Duluth for Clean Water. I was part of an advertisement for them. But the main two actually, I was part of this group called Friends of the Climate, and we are a group of 5 young women, including myself, and we submitted a brief to the Minnesota Court of Appeals opposing a natural gas plant that's proposed to be built in Superior. And we were against it on the basis of our finances and our futures, because it would continue to pump poisonous gases into our atmosphere, and it was anything but natural. And then it would also cost $350 million to Minnesota taxpayers.
Okay.
So it would have been a huge cost on both of those things for us in the future and currently. And so, and we're still waiting to hear what the Minnesota Court of Appeals has decided.
Okay.
And so I went to speak at the public hearing in Superior. That was a couple weeks ago. And I spoke about it at the climate strike, which brings up the other thing that I'm involved with. I have the last strike on September 20th, I was one of the student organizers that did it, or organized it, and then I also spoke about natural gas. And there's another strike that is going to be happening in Duluth on the 6th of December, but I've taken a step back just because right now my personal health has kind of taken a dip down into the deep end, and it was just quite a bit. But while I've been stuck in my bed, I have been writing, and so I am writing a book, and I am not done with it yet, but I would say I'm probably 3/4 there. And it's just about being a teenager in the climate crisis, and I'm hoping that when anyone reads it, they can find something they relate to. It's based off, it is my life in the book.
Right.
And I just have like a different chapter for a different subject.
Okay.
Like I have a chapter about how I got involved, and then I have a chapter about what friendship looks like and politics looks like in these days. And then I have a chapter about like what to do when people are hating on you, like what it's like, and then also like living a sustainable life as a teenager in this world.
Right.
And I really tried to be like super honest and open, and even when it made me look bad, because I'm going to be honest, I have an addiction to bagels, and too often those come in plastic bags.
Okay.
And so I tried to reduce all of that, but I just wanted to be like super honest and show that like there's so much imperfection in myself, and that we need a bunch of imperfect people doing something.
Okay.
Because one perfect person doesn't make a huge difference.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's one of the current projects that I'm working on to try, and I'll try and see where that goes.
What compelled you to want to write this book? Anything in particular? Or?
I guess I just had like a lot of thoughts on my mind that I really wanted to get out there.
Okay.
Because I was just like, you hear about these like climate anxiety. I know Greta Thunberg's talked about it.
Yes.
And that like, but when you hear it in some speakers, but you have to be like part of that crowd that listens to that.
Okay.
And I wanted to go beyond and just to all teenagers to like talk about this, like this thing that affects everyone. It affects all of us. And I wanted to show like my personal experience with it, and hope that other people can relate to it. And like, it's not really a book of like solutions or like fossil fuels. I mean, there's definitely part of that in there, but it's more like these are the emotions around the climate crisis, because there's so many,
Right.
especially for young people, when it's like our futures that we kind of go to school and we prepare for this future that we don't even know we will have.
Right.
And when I go to college, and my parents are both from California, so they really want me to go to school in California, and I'm like,
Oh,
I'm not going to California. That's like one of the worst places to be in the climate crisis.
Right.
And it's just like we're all just making these decisions based off of that.
Right.
And so I really wanted to put all those thoughts and emotions in my head and put them down, and hope that people can read it and relate to it and know that they're not alone.
Right. That's a great idea. The other young people that you go to school with or that you socialize with, especially in high school and college, what kind of thoughts or feelings are they sharing when you talk to them?
Well, it's so mixed. And I think the general population in my high school knows that the climate crisis is happening. And then they're split between, well, we can't do anything about it and don't do anything, and then we got to do something about it and taking action and signing petitions.
Okay.
And it's so unfortunately that like a lot of people don't realize or don't want to realize that like it affects everyone. It's not just going to affect like the Democrats or the liberals, like it's everyone.
Right.
But there's such like, we can't even vote, but we're all so political at this point.
Right.
And like there's an atmosphere of like a lot of not disagreements, but just differing opinions that can be really strong. But generally, most people accept that the climate crisis is happening, and it can just cause like a lot of stress, even if we don't really talk about it or realize it.
Right. I know this past September, I think it was probably the first time we met, you came to attend the Climate-Duluth forum at ACO.
Yes.
And it was a pleasure to have you there. You were one of our speakers. What was that experience like for you that evening?
It was really awesome. It definitely got me connected with you, and you have been such a help in getting more involved with stuff going around in Duluth, which I love to do. That was just, I think it was a really good experience that we had like that forum to talk about. I wish we had more time for questions and spread that message. Like, I don't know, the purpose of it was to talk about the media, but I think just having those like open and honest conversations, because everyone on that board was different. Like, we weren't all the same, and that's
True.
why it was so important to hear those differing opinions, because like the climate crisis affects all of us, and I will say that over and over again, because it's not like a group of people, and certain groups are certainly affected more and faster, and that needs to be addressed, but like overall in the long run it's going to affect everyone. And so having those differing opinions is so important, because this is a conversation that needs to include everyone. Right. And we definitely need to center on voices that are going to be more impacted by the climate crisis. But it's still something that everyone needs to be involved in. It was really great to be in that setting.
Yeah. When you mentioned California for school, but when you think about your future and the things you would like to do or be involved in, when you have those moments, what do you think your future is going to be like? What will you be involved in?
Well, I've had a plan set out for myself for a long time, and it changes like every 2 years. But
Okay.
Right now, my dream school is Columbia in New York.
Okay.
Or I just really want to be in that city because it's just so diverse. And I think it would be a great experience. Or just go into like a big college. And then I want to double major in environmental sciences and either international relations or political sciences.
Okay.
And then I want to come back to Minnesota and go to law school and get my environmental law degree. And then I want to use that to go into politics.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'll practice with the environmental law degree or go straight to politics, but we'll see.
So am I looking at a future congresswoman?
Yeah, maybe president, we'll see.
Okay. I'll get your autograph now. When you look at Duluth in Minnesota, either presently or in the future, what are some of the issues or concerns you have about our region when it comes to the environment and climate change? Anything in particular?
I definitely feel like because we're in Duluth, and like the New York Times named Duluth as one of the 2 cities safer from the climate crisis,
Right.
that a lot of people here don't really see that it's happening, especially because like it's Duluth. Erratic weather is literally our normal. Like,
Okay.
Being 80 degrees one day and then negative 20 the next day, although that's totally hyperbole, but like that is kind of normal at this point. Like it's just Duluth. So I think it's harder for people to see what's happening, and then I think it's harder for them to listen to the voices of others, especially like when they don't really want to put aside their privilege and like our privilege, because I live in Duluth, and listen and hear that it's happening, because that it's happening right now. Like, it's not going to be a future thing.
Okay.
That it's happening right now all over the world.
Right.
And then having projects like Polymet, which is, I think, a huge issue that's happening in Duluth and in this Minnesota region, and just not even really considering like the future impacts of it, especially because water is so precious. and we need it. And people just not really realizing what a catastrophe that would be, just because we're in that privileged area where we don't really feel the harshest effects of climate change yet.
Okay, yeah. At this point in your life, where do you get your news and information about climate change? Is it from teachers? Is it from newspapers, magazines, books? Where do you get your information these days?
Newspapers are the main one.
Okay.
I have like the New York Times app on my phone.
Okay.
And I love the New York Times. I feel like that's where I get a lot of my information. And if I'm wanting information of, like, I'll see something on social media about a topic and I'll be like, wow, that looks like really horrible or interesting. And I always make sure to check up on it and make sure that it's real, just because you can't be too careful, you know?
Right.
But that's where, like, I can get a lot of information that I'll do more research on to make sure that it's real, and then I can start talking about that.
Okay. One thing I've noticed in talking to people is all these feelings you talked about that we have when we think about or contemplate climate change and how we take care of ourselves. So for you, at this young age, what are some of the things you do to take care of yourself mentally, emotionally, so this doesn't become so overwhelming for you?
I don't know. I think in a weird way that taking action and, like, trying to help can do both things. It can make me more stressed because it's like work,
Right.
but it can make me less stressed because then I know I'm doing something about it,
Okay.
that I'm trying to help. But there's a lot of stress, and I guess just there's nothing really specific that I do just to, like, help with, like, my anxiety over the climate crisis, but just anxiety in general, just like the same things that you would do. Like, I would talk to my parents and be like, hey, I'm feeling this way, like, let's have a conversation about it, or go watch bad TV, or because it's just entertaining and it gets my mind off of it. But definitely, I feel like the biggest one, because I'm, like, stressed and I'm like, oh my God, all these things are happening, my life, like, this is my future, that taking action to try and change that is one of the biggest ways to help, because then I feel like I'm doing something.
Okay. And when you talk to your friends who have those same feelings, is that the same kind of advice you give them, or do you find yourself offering other suggestions to your friends?
I think just doing what they think is best. I would push them to find positive information, because there's a lot out there.
Right.
Like, people are doing so much to help, and there is things that have improved. But if they want, I just say, if you want to get involved, like, here's a bunch of things that you can get involved in. And I can certainly help you do that. Like, I'm here. But it's just whatever, it depends on the person, honestly. Like, who they are, and, like, what I think they would be most into in helping that. But I think, honestly, at this point, we kind of just deal with it. Like, we don't really do anything specific, but, like, a lot of the youth are like, yeah, the climate crisis is happening. Like, that sucks. I'm scared, but I can't really do anything about it.
Wow.
So I'm just one person, and I feel like that's a mentality of a lot of people, that, like, the climate crisis is happening, but, you know, I'm just one person, so.
Right.
And then they just don't do anything.
Right.
Which I definitely feel like they should be doing something, because that's just the way I am. But, you know, it's their life.
Right. Yeah. Now, besides all the work you're doing collectively in the community, have you noticed that you've made any changes in your personal life as a young person over the last few years because of the environment or climate change?
Definitely. I definitely try to be environmentally conscious of everything I'm doing. Like, most of my clothes are all thrifted. Okay. Partly because it's super cheap, and partly because it's better for the environment. And I'm vegetarian. I used to eat all meat, and then I only ate the meat my dad hunted just because it didn't have an environmental impact. And then I was walking my dog one day, and I looked at my dog, and I was like, deer are just big dogs. And I decided not to eat meat.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And anyone can eat whatever they want. That's just, like, my personal decision, just because I know the meat industry has such a big and large negative environmental impact. And so, and that's like a big change that's happened in my life. And because of that, my family, they all eat meat, but most of our meals are vegetarian now. So that's like a kind of big house impact that's happened, which which was unintentional on my part, but not wholly unwanted.
No, that's impressive. I have found that when people make a personal choice, that other people are watching, and sometimes they follow, and it sounds like your family has watched what you've done and
Yeah.
try to support you.
Yeah, definitely. My family is really supportive. Yeah. And I try to limit my plastic use. I mean, that can feel really impossible just because, like, half of my school supplies, or the majority of my school supplies, have, like, plastic in them, even if it's not single-use plastic necessarily. And it can feel really impossible.
Right.
But I definitely try to limit it. Just do whatever I can, even though, like, I'm taking big action, but also, like, just doing those little things makes me feel better. Because if everyone's doing those little things, then that helps.
True. Now at your high school, whether it's in classes or when you gather with teachers, are there any conversations in any of your classes about the environment and climate change?
Definitely. I feel like that can be, like, in science class, we'll talk about it. Last year, I had biology class, and my teacher made sure to include that in a lot of conversations.
Okay.
I mean, he's also runs the Green Club at our school, so
okay.
and that's a club at our school that I'm involved in. And a project right now that we're doing, or we're getting started on, is trying to get the public schools to install solar panels.
Oh.
But yeah, we're just getting started on that project.
Okay.
And I'm really looking forward to it. Someone told me about that Harbor City, the school there, is trying to do it, and I was like, okay, we have to do it at East.
Okay.
We have to do it, and then now it's expanded to the ISD 709 school district.
Okay.
But it's just getting started, so we'll see. The Sierra Club is helping us out with that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And so there's definitely, back to the question, there's definitely a lot of talk at school about the climate crisis, and a lot of it can be, like, in a joking manner, just because we're teenagers and we deal with things through humor. Not unfortunately, but it's kind of an odd thing, but it's, and so you'll hear it in conversations and people just making jokes, and, or in Spanish class, my Spanish teacher had us do a little almost unit on the Amazon rainforest fires, and through that way we learned about things that were happening in the world using Spanish.
Okay.
So I feel like teachers are definitely, like, more aware and trying to educate us a little bit, and not necessarily saying, like, the climate crisis is happening, but making us aware of events that are happening, or just like the science behind it. Sometimes, like in science class, which I think is really great.
Right.
I definitely think the climate crisis should be taught in school.
Okay.
But yeah, I feel like there is, especially with teachers, there's a large support system, and a lot of the students at the school are big supporters of, like, the climate strike or other movements like that. So.
No, it's great. It sounds like you have some very engaged and involved teachers that are trying to do their best.
Definitely.
Yeah. And the Green Club, so how long has the Green Club been around?
I don't know. I just joined this year. I didn't really know that it was a club, and then I heard about it, and I was like, okay, I have to join.
Okay.
But I know it's been around a while because the new Sierra Club person in Duluth was a member of the Green Club when she was in high school.
Oh, okay.
So that might be why they're helping us out. She's close to her heart.
Okay.
But yeah, I know that back then it was a lot more like doing trash pickups and planting things instead of taking, like, big actions towards like pushing things forward.
Yeah.
And I know that there's still a big part of that is about, like, doing community service and volunteering and stuff like that. But yeah, definitely going to be doing more big projects.
Okay. Over the past year, you've shared some of the things you've been involved in. Have you been doing a lot of speaking engagements or talking to the media? Or
Yes, definitely.
Okay.
I spoke at the climate strike on September 20th. I spoke at city council meetings.
Okay.
And then I got to be a part of that advertisement for Polymet, not
Okay.
for Polymet, against Polymet by Duluth
Okay.
for Clean Water, which wasn't really public speaking, but I got to go up on stage and talk a tiny bit before they showed the advertisement, and then I got to meet Arnie Carlson, so that was fun.
Okay.
And then I got to speak at the climate mobilization kickoff.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, and then I got to speak at the Line 3 Gitchy Gammy gathering,
Yes.
which was so powerful, and I was so lucky to be a part of.
Why was that powerful for you, that event?
There was just so many people there, and so many people supporting, and just seeing like the indigenous communities, like seeing it a little bit firsthand of how it can really affect their lives.
Mhm.
And it really made me a lot more aware, and I feel like it showed me my privilege,
Okay.
and helped me be a better activist
Okay.
when it comes to the climate crisis.
Well, Izzy, this went really fast. I
Yeah.
can't thank you enough for being
Of
here.
course,
I
thank
really
you.
appreciate it. My pleasure. To close the show today, I'd like to read a short excerpt from a book called Act of Hope by Joanna Macy and Chris Johnston. And it's somewhat appropriate given the guest we have today. Quote, "When a change wants to happen, it looks for people to act through. How do we know when a change wants to happen? We feel the want inside us. There is a desire, a tugging at us to be involved. But that doesn't make the change inevitable, because standing in our way are those who say we're wasting our time, that it isn't possible, that it will be too hazardous. For the change to happen through us, we need to counter those voices. A shift can happen within us when we break through a resistance that's been holding us back. When we see with new eyes, we recognize how every action has significance, how the bigger story of the great turning is made up of countless small stories of communities, campaigns, and personal actions. We don't know whether these changes will happen fast enough to avoid collapse, but given the unpredictable nature of discontinuous change, they just might. This is not the same as being confident, but it does involve being open to the possibility of success. Take care."